Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Tortoise Reptile right here on YouTube. Today we are going to conquer the daunting task of making sure you have everything ready prior to bringing your tortoise home. I've created a list to simplify things, to make sure everything's ready to go. It's a 6-step list. We're going to go over everything because the last thing you want to do is not have everything ready prior to bringing your tortoise home, or you bring your tortoise home and you forget to get something that's vital to its needs. Today's video, I'm going to help you guys simplify all of that process. Plus, guys, I'm going to be throwing in a bonus tip that will help you guys with everything on the list. And don't forget, we're going to be doing Under the Show segment where I answer one of your questions right here on Tortoise Reptile. Hey guys, before we start with today's video, I want to introduce myself if you're new to the channel. My name's John. I do educational videos about turtles, tortoises, and other reptiles. Plus I get to go see cool things like zoos, nature centers, and other pet stores that have unique things. If you guys are new to the channel, could you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, and don't forget to like the videos because it helps me understand what content you guys enjoy the most. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's video, I created a list, a 6-step checklist that looks like this one here, and this is what we're going to go over today's video. This list can be found in the comment section of this video, as well as on the Tortoise Reptile Facebook page and YouTube pages. This is free for you guys because I want you to have this valuable information. So let's go over this checklist in order. Number 1, we're going to talk about the researching that you need to do for the basic care requirements. We're going to talk about whether you should build or buy an enclosure. We're going to talk about the setup of the enclosure, the substrate, the hides, feeding and water dishes. We're also going to talk about timers, lighting, UVB and basking requirements, as well as how to test all of these elements. We're going to talk about purchasing basic tools that you're going to need for your tortoise. We're going to talk about purchasing food and vitamins and supplements, and also, guys, we're going to have a special bonus that covers an idea that will help all of the stuff here on this list. So let's go ahead and get started with your basic care requirements. Number 1 on our list is researching basic care requirements for your tortoise. This will dictate everything else on this list. The more research you do and the more understanding of what your tortoise needs in the wild is a great way to ensure that your tortoise is going to be happy from the moment you bring it home. Now, there are resources that you can use for researching, such as reptile magazines or books that you can buy, whether they're online or at a bookstore, plus going on the web. The important thing that I would recommend for you is not to focus in on just one resource. I would use many resources such as YouTube or the books and the forums and stuff, and get a collective answer and to get the best judgment you can to make sure that your tortoise is ready to go when you bring it home. So, things that I learned, example would be the Egyptian tortoise enclosure behind me here. That tortoise actually lives on the Mediterranean Sea, right on the edge. So that means that it requires some sort of misting in the morning, even though it's considered a dry, arid tortoise species. And so because of that research, I know now that I have to mimic that here, and that allows him to have the same sort of environment that he would in the wild that he does here in captivity. And that's why researching your basic care requirements is so vital to you, and that's why it's number 1 on our list, because it helps you understand everything we're going to go over in steps 2 through 6. So let's go ahead and head on to number 2. Question number 2 on our list is whether you're going to build or buy your enclosure. And there's a couple of factors here. 1, are you a handy guy? Are you good with tools? Then maybe building something would be a little cheaper option for you. Of course, it takes time to construct, and you should take that into consideration prior to bringing your tortoise home. The second option, which is buying an enclosure like the Toad Ranch enclosures behind me here, are a little bit more easier to deal with because it's already pre-fabricated for you. You just have to assemble it. It costs a little bit more money to go that route, but you have something ready to go. The other thing to understand, especially with toad ranch enclosures like this, is oftentimes there's a lead time for these to ship to your house. And keep that in mind when you're bringing your tortoise home. So the two options, buy or build, they both have that time window that you have to consider. Keep that in mind when we discuss question number 2. So let's go ahead and go on to question number 3. Okay guys, next step number 3 is setting up your substrate, your hides, your food dishes, your water dishes. This part here is fun. This is a good part because you're bringing your empty box to life. You get to put everything where you want it to be and kind of orchestrate how the tortoise is going to be traveling through the enclosure to get to its food and water dishes. Setting up multiple hides so it has choices in the enclosure. This is a fun part. I really enjoy it. So key things to keep in mind here is make sure your substrate is deep enough for them so it thermally regulates and creates a microclimate for your tortoise. The other thing is to understand what type of tortoise you have so you set up the appropriate substrate. When it comes to food and water dishes, the key things is accessibility. So you want to make sure that the tortoise can get easily in and out of that water dish and make sure that it's able to grab food off of that food dish and that food dish blocks out any substrate from getting on top of it. You want to make sure that substrate is far away from its mouth when it's eating to prevent impaction. Next thing you want to worry about is their hides. You want to make sure their hides are both easy for them to get in and out of and not an obstacle for them to climb over and fall. A key thing that I like to do with my enclosures is actually keep the hides away from the walls. And the reason for that is they like to travel around the perimeter of the enclosure. It's inevitable, they're just curious, and that's what they do. If you put something like a hide up against the wall, they're going to want to climb over it even more so than just curiosity. It's in their way. So that can create a fall risk and you want to avoid that. So I like to put all of my hides away from the walls. Alright guys, that's it for this step. Let's move on to the next step, number 4 on our list. Alright guys, the next step on our list is the mechanics of what we're doing here. This is the timers, the lighting, both UVB and basking bulbs, as well as how to measure all of this stuff. And it's important to really pay attention to this step in your checklist based on step number 1, doing your research. You have to know what Ferguson zone your tortoise requires in the wild and mimic that here in your enclosure. If you want to learn more about Ferguson zones, UV lighting, and basking lighting, I have a video right here that you guys can check that out in. But for today's video, for the list that we're doing, I'm just going to show you where placement comes into play and as well as how to measure everything that we're going to be talking about. So, when it comes to your UV light, which is this big black strip behind me here, you have to measure the distance between the light and the top of the tortoise shell that it's going to be on. Now there's a tool for that, and I'll show you that right here, that measures UVB output. The important thing here to consider is that even though that light may be on, after about 6 months or so, the UVB output is not going to be as strong as it was when it's brand new or completely done, not making any UVB output at all. And that light becomes useless. It's just a light that's sitting in there and you need to replace it. With the basking bulbs, you have to make sure that the basking distance from the bulb to the top of their shell is appropriate for that tortoise, where it's not going to get too hot being directly underneath it and yet provide ample warmth in that hot spot for them, again based on the recommendations of your tortoise, and have enough ambient heat throughout the whole enclosure. It's better to have a basking bulb on one side, that way they have the gradient and they could choose, give them options to choose the cold side or the warm side or a variant in between to be happy and comfortable in their enclosure. The whole idea of this, guys, with everything we're talking about on this list, is to make sure that your tortoise is comfortable in its new environment. So let's go on to the measuring side of things. So there are tools that you need, and that's going to segue into the next. Okay guys, real quick, I want to talk about timers. Timers are important for you because they automatically turn on the lights in your enclosure. You can set up the dial on your timer to how long you want the lights on and how long you want the lights off. Or if there's an intermittent time where you want the lights to come on and then off again, you have that option as well. The good thing to know about timers is they are an automatic insurance that you could have your lights on. Otherwise, you're going to have to manually turn them on yourself. Key to note here with timers is that you want to make sure that the timer you're using is rated for the wattage of everything in your enclosure. The last thing you want to do is have something that's not rated for that and catch something on fire. That's right, it's a safety risk. So the good thing and peace of mind is to get a Reptile brand timer to ensure that you are going to have everything you need safely done in here and that you're not going to catch anything on fire due to a wattage discrepancy. I want to talk about lighting fixtures. The important thing with lighting fixtures is to make sure that the element that holds that light bulb in is ceramic, not plastic. The ceramic holders that the bulb screws into, it holds heat better and can handle higher wattage bulbs like the basket bulbs that you're using. The plastic ones will fail on you and cause a fire. It's a safety concern. I want to bring it up in this list real quick. So let's go ahead and talk about those tools to measure everything in the enclosure we just talked about. Alright guys, next up we're going to be talking about tools of the trade. These are the things you're going to need to purchase in order to maintain and ensure that your tortoise is living a happy life in its new environment. As I mentioned before with the Egyptian enclosure behind me here, it's important to have that mist in the morning for them. And also to keep up humidity requirements in your enclosures, it's nice to have a spray bottle like this one here. Of course you can go with an automated system for your enclosures, but I like to have a manual system like this because I like to check up on my enclosures, make sure everything's ready to go, and that gives me an opportunity to check on each individual enclosure here at Third Coast Reptile. Moving on to other tools that you're going to need, temperature gun is really good because you can have a gauge in your enclosure, but that's only going to monitor that individual area. And you want a broad spectrum of your enclosure. So using a temp gun like this, you simply point and shoot, and it'll show you the temperature of any given spot in the enclosure, and that'll give you that gradient that you're looking for the warm spot underneath the basket bulb, all the way to the cool side, so you meet your minimum and maximum requirements for your enclosure. A key note with this is you want to make sure that you open the enclosure to point it at the direct substrate in the enclosure, because this will take the temperature of the glass, not what's behind it. Next up, we're going to be talking about this little guy here. This is something they use to measure UVB output. This is a UVB meter, and this is used to measure the output of your UVB light. Again, with that 6-month interval, you want to ensure that your light is performing to its best capabilities. And you can measure that with this throughout the enclosure to see where your tortoise is getting the most UVB exposure. It's very important to their health to have that UVB exposure, and this is an excellent tool to make sure that they have what they need. Next up, we're going to be talking about gram scales. A gram scale like this one here is an excellent way to periodically measure the weight of your tortoise. It's not about size, it's about weight when it comes to tortoise's health. And when you get your tortoise home, it's good to have that baseline weight established so you know where you're starting from. A key note with weight is you want to take it with a grain of salt. You don't want to stress over no gain in weight, but you do want to observe when there's loss in weight. Next thing on our list is a small container like this one here. This is important because as soon as you get your tortoise home, you want to give them a nice soaking. Often when you get your tortoise shipped to your house, they become to you dehydrated, or they've soiled their container that they come in, and that means they're ready to get rehydrated. And there's no better way to do that than give them an initial soak and get them more relaxed when they get home, and that warm soak will help them get better acclimated to their new environment. Alright, number 6 on our list is probably the most obvious thing you're going to do for your tortoise, and that's to make sure you pre-purchase food ahead of time, along with vitamins and supplements. It's really important to get this stuff at home, ready to go. The last thing you want to do is get everything done, your research, your build, your enclosure, substrate, lighting, water dishes, and have your tools, and simply forget to have food ready for them when they get home. Again, that traveling overnight shipment stresses them out, and oftentimes they'll defecate in their enclosure, their little container that they come in, and they're hungry when they get home. And it's a good indicator that they're going to be okay in that enclosure if they start eating right away. It's always a good feeling to see them eat as soon as you get them home. So having that food readily available for them is key. And then also, having the vitamins, having the supplements like Missouri Diet is really good to have at home right off the bat too, so that way you can get that cycle going with them and have their diet established right away from day one. Alright guys, let's get into the Under the Shell segment where I answer one of your questions right here on Third Coast Reptile. Got questions? Then get your answer right here on Under the Shell. Alright guys, today's question is kind of unique. This is something that somebody was talking to me about in YouTube short. He was chatting with me about it. The question was, you know, your name is Third Coast Reptile, and your videos say, like the tour video I did was all of my reptiles, but it's primarily tortoises here. And why is that? Why is, you know, you'd like to see more variety? And I couldn't agree more. I think that's something that, you know, is limited here. I do deal with tortoises. The reason why is I started out with, you know, anything I could get my hands on. I loved going to expos and picking up a new lizard and learning about it and doing the research and everything. And then as time went on, I sort of gravitated towards tortoises. I don't know, it's just something that I really enjoy with them. So I kept more of those, and that's just kind of where I am now. I really enjoy tortoises, and that's what I have in my house. I do zoo videos, and I do go to nature centers to explore other animals and show you those as well. However, I do have something to offer you guys. If there is an animal that you want to see in the channel, or maybe something you've been looking forward to seeing that you haven't yet, within reason, no crocodiles and, you know, Komodo dragons or anything, but I have friends, I have people that can get me those access to those animals, and I can show them right here on the channel. Okay guys, if you want your question answered here on Under the Shell, you can do so in one of 3 ways. Number 1, you can get your answer right here in the comment section. Number 2, you can go to Third Coast Reptile YouTube community chat, or you can simply go to Third Coast Reptile Facebook page and ask your question there. Alright guys, let's get back to that list. Alright, it's time for the end of the video bonus tip. Today's sponsor, Husbandry Pro. Husbandry Pro is a monitoring system where you can keep track of all the things we talked about in today's video. From feedings to supplements to soaks to weighing, all can be monitored right here in this app. If you change your UVB bulb, you document it here, and then you get a reminder from this 6 months later saying, hey, it's time to replace that UVB bulb. Or it needs to be weighed again, it's time to weigh again. All of those things can be monitored through the Husbandry Pro app. I'm going to give you guys a link where you can go directly to the Husbandry Pro app, and it kicks back to me, helping Third Coast Reptile as well. And if you guys have 5 animals, 5, it's free. It's free to use. So please take a moment, go to the Husbandry Pro app, check them out, see what they have, follow my link, and then you guys will get to enjoy this really great quality app. Alright guys, that's the end of today's video. I just want to say thank you for watching today. I really enjoyed this one, and until next time, bye now.